Good morning, everyone. So it is Monday on week 3, and this is facility design. Today we'll be talking about a couple different areas of the facility design and also the design development process, as well as how do we accommodate people with disabilities and what is the accessibility design requirements. So I'm just going to go ahead and start, if I can find my mouse. Okay. All right, so actually before I start, I will say something that as this is Monday of the first week, or the third week, I did want to let you know that I've been in contact with many of you. Some of you are having some lag issues with the remote accessing the Georgian College computers, and I'm well aware of that, and so is Cyril aware of that. We're going to do the best that we can to ensure that everyone has a solid internet access, that we're able to access that program and do a pretty good job of using it. As far as some best practices, I would often save as much as possible, and please email yourself the Visio file. So that way, regardless of what computer that you are logging onto, it should be there. It should be there when you log in under your own credentials, and if you save it to the computer, it should be there if you just keep logging back on because it's under your own credentials. But I have had a few people say it's been an issue to finding it after they've already designed half of it. So, and just in an overabundance of caution, what we should do is either email it to ourselves, save it to a zip drive or to your home computer, something where you know that it's always going to be there, so you're not going to be forced to keep on doing the same thing over again. Okay, so worst case scenario, if you still have a lot of trouble with this, there are free programs. Now, we would have to get you to run through all of the options that you can to ensure that you can get Visio working. If we hit a roadblock, there are free programs like floorplanner.com where you can sign up for like a free version of it. It's not as in-depth as what we're using, but in this scenario, when it comes to these technical difficulties in this strange time that we are in right now, we will accept something like this. But please confer with us, make sure you choose a good one, and we'll go from there. So today we're going to talk about design development. We're going to talk a lot about the standard flow and designing a traffic flow, which has a lot to do with accessibility as well. And when we are in class on Wednesday, this is what the next major assignment will be, designing an area and all basing it around accessibility and traffic flow. So how to move a lot of people around quickly. And things you want to think about when we talk about this are, like you can think about like the IKEAs of the world where they really are big people movers, or theme parks like Universal Studios or Disney or Canada's Wonderland, where it's all about moving people where we want them to move and where within what time frames we want them to move in. And there's quite a kind of cool science to it all, and I hope you like it as much as I do. So the steps in the planning process is what we talked about last week. So this is preparing the prospectus, so looking at what we actually want to design, looking at if it's an original standing building with already preset structure in place, or are we building a brand new place. We organize our planning team, which is yourselves, but also the use of different designers and engineers and things like that. Conduct a feasibility study, so ensuring that this facility that we are designing, this food and beverage operation, makes sense. What's the competition? What's out there already? Does it have something in place? Am I designing an Italian restaurant in an area where there's within a couple blocks 3 different Italian restaurants? We're also going to make a menu analysis. So a lot easier if there's already a pre-existing business. If it's a brand new one, that obviously takes a little bit more time. We consider the architectural feeling. So this is what the person feels when they're inside by how we choose what different designs or what different materials that we use. And then also just how much money do we have to do this. So at the end of the day, we always have to stay within some sort of budget. So then it comes to the design development, which we'll be looking at 2 of these areas. So after we complete what we just spoke about, all those preliminary preparations, we haven't really done anything yet, right? So we've just done all of the background work and ensuring that we are able to do this and it makes sense, and we're thinking about all the possible problems that could come up. once we've decided that, okay, it's a green light, we're going to continue on with this project, this facility design, what do we need to do? Now, we can only really do the first 2 steps in this particular class, because then after that point, that's when you would start preparing and submitting to architects, builders, owners, contracts, and all that different stuff. So that's kind of out of our hands. But what we can do is determine our space allowances, and this is really useful using a flow diagram, and then prepare a schematic to scale. So show all the different spaces within our facility design. So there's a couple different ways in which we determine floor space. You will see if you go through just restaurant layouts or food and beverage layouts, they all have a fairly consistent or common style of design. There's all these particular spaces that have requirements. Now, that being said, service styles are going to have a huge impact on your design as well. So if you were serving a buffet, obviously it's going to take a lot of your floor space, but you're not going to need as much room in the kitchen. If you're going to do more of like a banquet, like a wedding, so seated banquet, where the kitchen space is quite large and servers are all going to bring out the food to the table as needed. So it really depends on the style of service, the menu, and the prospectus, but these are some of the common industry averages as far as the space requirements per seat. So this is per one butt in a seat. So it gives you an idea. School cafeterias, banquet dining, counter and fast service seating is the least requirement. Then we have prison and jail dining, which has a little bit more, but this is mostly because of the security measures that they have to keep in place. Commercial cafeterias and industrial and university cafeterias, they have a little bit more room for seating. And then we have the dining, fine dining hotels and clubs, where comfortability and intimacy really matter, as they're paying for that. So you have a lot more per square feet, which is fairly similar with wheelchair dining as well. So in many average food service restaurants, 65% of the place is used for dining, while about 35% is used for what we call the back of house. So that's your kitchen, your storage, and your prep, and washrooms and hallways and all that good stuff. Now, that being said, it's very dependent, of course, on the style of operation. Fine dining restaurants serve less food at a time than to a less crowded dining room. Therefore, less back house space is needed. But cafeterias serve a lot of people really quickly, in and out, in and out. So you'll see breakfast and lunch places, they typically have a faster serving time. So they flip their tables quicker, their seats per hour, or their table flips per hour are increased. Therefore, they need more space in the back to prep and hold all that stuff. A couple things you should know as well is that hospital service, as an example, 33 to 50% of the meals served in the dining areas, the rest is in the patient room. So a lot of that food and how you serve it, you'll have to ensure that there's proper transportation modes or customer flow or employee flow. So all of these food dishes need to get from that kitchen, stay warm, and get to those rooms within a reasonable amount of time. So this is some space allowance guidelines for specific kitchen types. Now these are just to give you an idea, just to guide your design a little bit. You don't need to stay within this necessarily, but it is helpful anyways. So they break it down by cafeterias, restaurants, and hospitals. And the good way of looking at it, this is more like commercial, industrial. Obviously this is healthcare, and then just this is commercial customer. So once you know how many seats you have in your restaurant, they give you an idea of how much square footage you may need. So if you are a 50 seat restaurant, then your receiving area is about 50 square feet. Now 50 square feet is not big. 50 square feet is 10 feet by 5 feet. So that's like a hallway. That's not a huge area for your receiving area. Dry storage, same thing. If you had 50 seats, you have about 100 square feet for dry storage. So that's 10 by 10. That's the size of a garden shed. So it gives you an idea exactly of where all the spaces should be. And you can see there that hospitals have the largest requirement for square footage based on seat, then restaurants, then cafeterias. So using these statistics, we looked at Roberta Lodge. So assuming wheelchair dining, and they want 113 seats. Wheelchair dining, if we look back to a couple slides, was 20 to 24 square foot per seat. If we were looking at it, we wanted 113 seats because they have 113 residents. Then we're going to say, okay, we will need about 2,486 square feet of area to serve those customers. Now, when you think about how would you relate that? What's the best way? So some of the classrooms that we've all been in, so our typical classroom is usually around, 30 feet by 30 feet. So that's 900 square feet. So when you think about that, you might need almost 3 of those classroom sizes for that dining area for that wheelchair dining. And then you also have the kitchen allowance. So again, going off that restaurant at 13.4, we have about 1,514. So our total needs on space is 4,000 square feet. That's the ideal size for serving 113 people. The size of an NBA basketball court is 4,700. So that gives you an idea of the size. At Roberta Lodge, we had, I think, under 3,000. So then we get into the idea of, okay, ideally we want 4,000. We don't have that much. What can we do to save some of the space while also maintaining 113 seats and also maintaining the ability for wheelchair dining? And it wasn't an easy fix. So when it comes to standard flow schematics, so by schematics I mean just the flow on a floor plan, we need to know where to start, we need to know how much room for each area, and something like this will help you here. So this is the standard flow schematic of a restaurant, although it's pretty similar to that of a cafeteria, and obviously it's going to be a little bit different than that of a prison or perhaps a hospital, but it's still very close. So first of all, it starts with your receiving area and your trash removal. So this would be the back door in a restaurant. So coming in the back door, and this is often where your employees go as well when they enter, they'll come in. This is what we call a receiving area. So this is for all of our food, all of our materials that we order in. It comes in the back, as well as trash is going out. And what's happening here is that we are bringing in our food, and once we need to know, we want it closely related to some of the storage areas. So it's either going to go straight to the refrigerator and freezer storage, or it's going to go to the dry storage. Or some of it could go right to the main cooking area, depending if it needs to be prepped. So the next step is using from your refrigerator, freezer storage. It's going to go to a couple places. So it may go to the pre-prep area, or it can go right to salad preparation, or it can go straight from your refrigerated areas into the main cooking area. Same thing with your dry storage. It'll go from dry storage to your main cooking area, or to your bakery prep if you have some sort of bakery prep area. And then the next step is when we apply heat for the final time. So there is a main cooking unit or area. They usually call it the hot line. And that's basically where we apply heat for the last time to our meals before they go to the particular customer. Now, this typically goes to a serving unit. So this could be just one counter in front of all the cooks, where once they're done making all their meal, they put it up and they plate it. Or this could be a larger area where the chef adds those garnishes and those special little extras at the end. Basically, all 3 of these areas must have a clear traffic flow to the serving unit. So the main cooking area, food can go up there, but then also salads can come over, and bakery prep and stuff can come over as well. And then the servers will bring it out to the guest. So this is all back of house. They'll bring it out to the guest, then the guest and the customer will then, we will return all of the different items from the table to the pot and pan washing area and dishwashing, and then out with the trash. And then new food in, and you repeat the cycle. So when I look at a map such as this, so this is a very, very basic restaurant. Where can I move this guy? Just move me up here. Okay, so this is a basic restaurant, but you could see right here, if you wanted to know, that it has seating for, let me see, 5 booths, so that's 20. another 20 or so, 40, 60, about 80 or so. So this is seating for about 80 people, give or take a few. This is going to be the front door where they enter. This seems to be some sort of host station here. This is your bar. This is seating or waiting. I don't know if this is the waiting area or just some more seating. And then this seems to be your main dining unit with this really cool kind of hexagon booth, a bunch of booth units, some tables, and then kind of semi-booth kind of units with a privacy wall, which is great. When it's really smart when it comes to design is having the ability and flexibility, or adaptability, I should say, of removing these privacy walls. So if I had big groups and I wanted tables of 8, I could do so. But that's something that we can talk about later. You'll also notice there is one point of sale system here as well as behind the bar. So the bartender can bring in drinks and food to the kitchen, and then this is the server station, POS. This looks like your glass dishwasher, which means they can bring all the glasses from the dining room right here. And the only thing I don't see in this setup is a drink service area where there isn't a stool. So if you look at this, you'd say, okay, I would need an area as a bartender to make my drinks and then put them up. So this could be it, I suppose. It's really hard to tell. But usually what you would do is remove a couple of these stools, get them out of there, and then that could be like a service area. Going in from the back of house. So just like I said, exactly. So when we're going in from the back of house here, assuming our food is coming in this way, then they go straight into the coolers or into storage, which is the storage area. So this is probably be your dry storage. This is your refrigerated storage, or into the main line. As far as prep area goes, this is most likely the prep area back here, although it says cook line, and what your chefs are doing are cooking here, and then when they're completed, they're probably turning around and placing it up on this food service counter. You'll have a little staff area, so while this is not necessarily a part of the schematic or the flow, you will have to have a staff quarters area for everyone to hang their coats and their boots and get changed. There should be your own individual washrooms for staff versus them sharing what looks to be like the restaurant washrooms. And the design of the office is a little peculiar because all of the customers will have to walk down this by the office to go into the washroom. So that's the only part that I'd say is a little strange. But what happened is here is once the main unit is done, they put their food up, they grab their food, they enter into the dining room, they serve the table, and it looks like they would come this way, drop any glassware up here, and then bring all their dirty plates up into this kitchen and drop them off at that little dishwasher area. So a couple things that you need to understand is that you would have to design a flow diagram with a preliminary floor plan schematic. So basically you're doing a floor plan in Visio, but then you also have to show how people are moving around. And when you show how people are moving around, what you will also do is you'll find out those congestion or traffic areas that you might need to maybe just make more room, or you'll need to reroute how people walk around. As some general guidelines, when you start designing those areas, main transportation routes must be a minimum of 5 feet or 60 inches wide. So this is for the use of carts, but also wheelchairs. And when you think about it, think about if you go to Walmart, or any of those grocery stores. When you go to those grocery stores, they have smaller aisles that will have lots of stuff, but it's smaller and really only 2 people can get by each other. But then they'll have those massive aisles which are people movers, and they'll move you to the produce section, or they'll move you to the bakery section, which you could probably have 3 or 4 carts. Even in convenience stores and gas stations, you'll see the same thing. Okay, so and as I said before, when you transfer your workflow over to your floor plan, you will be able to identify some issues. So this one here is a home, of course, but this just gives you an idea of like the normal walking around that people do. And you will see that there are some huge areas where people are trying to walk in, where you're going to hit those congestion areas. Now in a home, you live together, it's not really a big deal. But even if this was a shared apartment and you had 3 or 4 different people living here, you'll see all those different congestion areas as they try to move around and go about their home. So then it comes to design and flexibility. So when we design, there is a universal design plan, I suppose you want to call it, that we try to abide by. Now we try to do it within our means. So we might not be perfect at all of these, but what we try to do is that we try to be as within reason of all of these 7 steps here, and also within budget. And that's kind of where the issues usually lie. So equitable use is usable by a diverse population. So that's ensuring that children can use this, as well as very tall people or very heavy people, people with disabilities, that it's all very able. When I think about all my years serving at the keg and managing the keg, we design that restaurant in a particular way to fit as many seats in there as possible, because seats equal money. But the problem is that we did not think about our customer demographic, and because we're a big steak and potato kind of place, we'd often get people who are quite large, and it was difficult for them to seat in many of the areas that we had. So a lot of the booths that they would try to squeeze in, they wouldn't be able to fit, or they wouldn't be able to fit comfortably, and that's just a very awkward situation. So you have to take into account the largest and the smallest of all the people that we might be trying to serve, in ensuring that we are able to design those areas so the customer is comfortable. Same with flexibility and use. So just like I said in that design, seeing if you can convert, these 2 floor tops, you can remove one portion of a wall and make it into a table that seats 8. Changing if you wanted to rent out your whole place, changing it so you could have a wedding in there, or an awards ceremony, or a retirement party. So, booths are very nice, and it's often the most requested. But the problem is with booths is that they often are just up against the wall. They seat 4 people, and there's no changing them whatsoever. You want simple and intuitive design, so area can be easily understood, not from only an employee standpoint, from a customer. And usually when you stand up in a restaurant, you look and you can tell, okay, that's the kitchen, I can't go in there. That seems to be where the bathrooms are going to be. Or that's going to seem where the bar is going to be. And you should know all of those kind of areas without having to be told or to be seeing the signs for it. Perceptible information, so easy to see and understand information. Tolerance for error, so just try to minimize your hazards, and that might be those blind corners where people are walking around where you don't want to run into each other. So, either trying to make sure you don't have those blind corners, or ensuring that you have signage or mirrors so people can see if someone's coming around. If there's a step, you can install light strips so they know that their step is there, stuff like that. Low physical effort, so the things that we can be flexible and move around for different variety of reasons, activities, we can do so with little fatigue. And then size and space is just making sure there's a reasonable amount of space for all the areas, including all the levels of mobility. So we often think about wheelchair accessibility as that is the largest accessibility device that we're going to be using. So, ensuring your restaurant, if we were in class right now, I always bring in a wheelchair and I would tape out areas that you have to stay within, and all of the students are amazed by how tight it can be and how precise you really need to be with a wheelchair when you're going around. So minimum room available for a 360 degree turn in a wheelchair is 96 inches, which is quite far. So you want an area with 96 inches for them to be able to turn around in. So when you think about your washrooms, when you think about the host areas, when you think about them going to a table, you have to keep that in mind. Now, not every area of the restaurant needs to be wheelchair accessible. Often what we do is that you design 10%, 15% of your restaurant with an accessibility for a wheelchair. If you have high tops in a bar, it's just not realistic that they're going to be able to sit up at the bar. But you have to ensure that you have some seating for everyone. So minimum room for a 180-degree turn is 54 inches, and then this just kind of gives you an idea of some of the turning space and the requirements for those. So there's a couple other things as well. So we also like to think about the parallel approach, the clear floor space. So they're about 30 inches by 48 inches. So 30 inches is what most doorways are mandatory must be, and that's so a wheelchair can get through them. That being said, 30 inches is them squeezing through. So, making doors 34, 36 inches is just smart. This is smart. And then also, there's some scooters, so they're about 26 inches, but they're also quite popular as well. So, and then we also have to think about when you have wheelchair accessibility, and we think about this in lodging a lot. So hospitality in hotel rooms is, okay, what is my reach? So from within a wheelchair, how far can I reach? So 9 inches off the floor to a max of 54 inches high. So if there's something on the floor, they are unable to use it. If they have to get into a cupboard, something that's not at least 9 inches, so the bottom of a cupboard in a kitchenette, they might not be able to. So if you have an accessibility designed room, what you have to ensure is that your cupboard space has, at least 9 inches off the floor before you put a pot, a pan, a bowl, or whatever it might be in there. And they can only reach about 10 inches into something, right? So when you're grabbing in, you can only go about 10 inches, which is not, it's less than a foot. So as far as the depth of some of these things, it can't be too deep. And then there's also the side reach over obstructions. So this is tables and things like that. So if you're having a 6-foot wide table, they can only ever reach 24 inches max. So if it's a 6-foot wide table and they're only 24 inches max on each side, they'll never be able to reach the center of that table. So just ensuring that the furniture and the things that you do use make sense. And again, just some more information as far as reading and reach again. So a maximum forward reach has a maximum reach of 16 inches off the floor to a max of 47 inches. So because you're going forward and not to your side, you don't nearly have the ability to reach down, because before it was 9 and now it's 16. And then also the eye level range. So writing and reading and mirrors and menus and all that kind of stuff, they're only about 43 to 41 inches high is where their head is going to stand. So having these big menus up on the wall that are 8 feet up on the wall, you got to be careful of. They might not be able to read that. So, this is often stuff that we take for granted, that we don't really think about too much. And then also, if you have an accessibility, an employee with accessibility issues, what you can do as well is ensure that they have a safe and a good place to work with. And this is not necessarily that means that you have hired somebody who is permanently in a wheelchair, but what often happens is that we hire people and there are accidents. They break an arm, they break a leg, and we have what they call the duty to accommodate. So we have to give them work tasks that they are able to complete. So, it could be as simple as folding napkins or rolling cutlery or working at the host desk. But is there the ability, and have you had it set up so someone can sit on a stool or in a chair and work in those areas? So it's kind of useful that when you are designing, let's say your prep area in the back, which could be a great area to do that modified work, that ensuring that you have a table that a wheelchair can roll up under and that is able to be accessed and used by one of your employees. This is just some pathway and travel corridors. Now, it's just smart to think about the largest area possible. So a side-by-side wheelchair is 72 inches minimum. What is that? That's 7 feet. So 7 feet. Now, we said it must be 5 feet, your travel corridors as a minimum. And that's true. Now, 7 feet, the idea of that 2 wheelchairs are going to be going by each other in a commercial restaurant are very rare. If you are in a long-term dining environment or a retirement home dining, those odds increase drastically. It's almost expected. So then we have to change the way that we're going to look at this. So a side-by-side wheelchair is 72, wheelchair and upright walker, this one here, just a regular wheelchair, 43 inches. And then you even have canes as well as service dogs. So canes for the blind, up to 60 inches because they do have a pretty big breadth of the way that their cane will travel. So, just keep that in mind. Now, I've given a lot more information here as far as doors, and some design requirements. Not all of this will be used in some of the assignments, but all of this is testable material. That being said, all of our tests are open book. So if you are saying, okay, that was a lot of measurements and a lot of design talk, the expectation is that you don't have to memorize this information, but you do need to know how to look up this information when it matters or if it matters. A couple other things as far as wheelchair accessibility or disabled accessibility. Here are some of the ramps that are offered. Now, the thing about ramps is ensuring that the slope is not too steep. Specifically in our climate, because of weather issues where it could be slick, we can't have an area where it's a very steep incline or decline, because then what can happen is that if the brakes fail, or if someone's pushing and you just lose hold of it, what could happen is that person can just go off. So we got to be careful with that as well. And that brings us to the end of this class. So we talked about what is the first two steps. So this is basically looking at schematic flow, floor plans, and traffic flow, and then also looking at different accessibility concerns when it comes to facility design. Wednesday, 6 p.m., we are going to meet. We will talk about our next in-class assignment. This particular in-class assignment will talk about how do we develop a school cafeteria where we know that there will be accessibility issues from some of our students, but we also need to set it up for at least 150 people. I will go through it in a little bit more detail and give you some hints and tips and tricks while we're in class next week or this week. But other than that, I hope you all enjoyed the last 32 minutes and 13 seconds. Happy Monday, and I will see you soon.